Awesome. Are we ready to get started? Yes. All right. Well, welcome everybody. So good to see all of you, for those that I can see. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rita Yelda. I am the Outreach and Communications Manager for the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed. And on today's webinar, we're going to be learning tips for building your organization's email list. So obviously, email is an incredibly powerful tool. It's utilized to send advocacy, action alerts, e-newsletters, event announcements, fundraising asks, and a lot of other things. And today we're going to learn some of these tips that your organization can utilize to boost your email open rate, to better communicate with supporters, and to really communicate, with all of your varying audiences. So this webinar is being recorded, as Hillary mentioned. A link will be sent to everybody afterwards so that you can download it and watch it as many times as you'd like. So this webinar is organized as part of the CDRW Communications Work Group. So if you are a member of the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed and you want to join our work group, feel free to send me a message in the chat box and I can add you to the email list. We meet every month over the phone to talk about our collective communications assets and how we can leverage those to support common priorities and really elevate the status of the Delaware River watershed. And we provide trainings like this, as well as social media materials to help improve and expand the coalition's communications capacity. So again, feel free to just send me a message in the chat box to join. So please, we're going to do a Q&A at the end of this. So as you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. And we'll hold those for the end unless there's something that's really pertinent to what Kristen is talking about. And then with that, I'm going to pass it off to Hillary Mohop, the Social Media Strategist and Inclusion Manager for Conservation and Conservation Voters.
Thank you. You may have noticed that Rita might have some technical difficulties today, and so I'm sure some of you are dealing with the fallout from yesterday's hurricane, so we hope that everyone is safe. So yeah, before I pass it over to Kristen, I just wanted to give you all a brief overview of the work that Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania and New Jersey LCV does in support of watershed organizations. So we are funded to provide support to organizations working in the Delaware River watershed to support you in building your constituencies through webinars like this and working with you to help build your email list and providing support to turn out people to your events, whether they are virtual or in person at some point in the future. And then also providing one-on-one support for social media. And Kristen Zolkowski is the Director of Digital Engagement for both Conservation Voters of PA and New Jersey LCV. She spearheads our Delaware River Watershed program that is partly to build a digital megaphone of more than, I think at this point, 80,000 email activists. Before Kristen came to New Jersey LCV and Conservation Voters of PA, she was the digital director for NARAL Pro-Choice America in DC. And before that, she did historical research, and we are very excited that she is here to talk about building email lists today. So I will pass it over to you, Kristen.
Awesome. Thanks, Hillary. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. As Hillary said, I'm Kristen Zolkowski, the Director of Digital Engagement with New Jersey LCV and Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. And as Hillary mentioned, we are funded by the William Penn Foundation to do capacity building for groups like yours. So if you have more questions on digital organizing and outreach, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would absolutely love to talk more with your organization. But so today I'm going to talk about, ways to grow your organization's email list. And hopefully, if we have time, we're also going to cover some tips for getting those emails opened. So we'll see if we can make it happen. One thing I wanted to flag that we're not going to cover is sort of the value of having an active email program, or why it's important to continually grow it. You're all here, so I assume that you're like totally already on board with that. But if that's something that you need to convince stakeholders internally, or other folks of why that's important, let's set up time to talk separately, but we're not going to get into that today. So like I said, we have a really full agenda, and I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions. So let's dive right in. So I wanted to cover a couple overarching best practices. So number one, it's super important to incorporate list growth really into everything that you're doing. So whether you're planning an event or an outing or whatever it is that your organization does, number one, thinking about how do you use your activities to reach new people, and then how are you capturing the information of those new people so that you can contact them in the future. It's just, super important to be intentional and plan for that, because, I can't tell you how many times I've been part of something where that level of detail just hasn't necessarily been mapped out, and it's really easy to leave those new people on the table and not get that information. So lesson number one. Number two, in terms of doing list growth, is making a single, clear, and compelling ask. I really like to think about my own email inbox. And, if you're like me, your inbox is probably full of unread emails, or emails where Gmail is saying, hey, you haven't responded in 5 days, and you're just really scrambling to keep up. So, if we want people to voluntarily hand over their information, tell us who they are, and sign up to get more information for us, we need to promise them content that is super awesome. We need to give them like a justification for why they're giving us their information, why they are telling us who they are. So just super important to focus on that content promise. And then secondly, the second part of that is a single ask. So there's a lot of data that shows that when you ask people to do something for you, if you ask them to do like more than one thing, they are less likely to do any of the things. So especially when it comes to efforts to grow your list, and especially when you're talking to new people, you don't want to overwhelm them with too many things. You want to offer like a very clear, here's the one thing you need to do. And of course that leads to you joining our list. And then I also wanted to highlight the importance of asking for bare minimum information. And again, maybe this is something that you totally are on board with, but you're having a battle internally. We've all been there, so it's okay. But you don't want to make it hard for, you don't want to create any reasons for people to say, oh my God, this form is so long. Why do you need all this information? Here's a great example I grabbed from our friends at Natural Lands on their website. They have 3 fields. And again, this is just their website and how that's set up to have people join their newsletter. I have no doubt that in subsequent communications with people, that there's lots of other ways that people can then engage with Natural Lands online and provide them with additional information, 100%. But just that first entry point, they're keeping it super easy, and that's very, very, very smart, especially when it comes to a website. And fourth, you always also want to just make sure you're being transparent about that you are adding people to your email list. So whether that's in person or online, if you're collecting information from them, you should at least have copy on there that says, sort of that fine print, you are going to be added to our list. So here's an example of an opt-in disclaimer. We have a pretty standard one on our action pages. I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, but it's just super important here's an example of being transparent. You don't want to get caught in a place too where it's really easy, it's easier than ever for people to be able to mark us as spammers or that kind of thing, especially when you're thinking about Gmail, but I'm sure all the other servers as well. So you need to have proof that people did actually agree to your terms. Not to end on something scary, but just something to keep in mind. So some ideas, which is where things always are more fun. And I wanted to start with low cost or no cost ideas. Offline, in person, it feels like that was another world ago. I actually am not going to spend a ton of time on in-person list growth, just because I don't know if you're like us. I mean, we actually don't really see the prospect of doing in-person work probably through the end of the year. So hopefully 2021 we'll be back to normal, but who knows. But I did just want to take this opportunity to remind you all again of that principle of just being intentional and being comprehensive, thinking about list growth no matter what it is that you're doing. So there's this example here. I believe we were at River Days, a festival organized by our friends at the Alliance for Watershed Education. And you can see right here our handy dandy clipboard, where we're asking people to, sign up, and I'm sure it was to sign a petition. One thing I did want to note about in-person list growth is that it is generally going to yield probably, I mean, there's always exceptions, but probably smaller, lower yields, right? It takes a lot more time to, if you have a table or you're at an event and have a sign-in sheet, you're not going to get like hundreds and hundreds of people at a time. Or if you're tabling and you get hundreds of people, that probably took a whole day. And thinking about what that translates, what that staff time translates into dollars. But it's still super important. There's so much value to your organization being out and about in the community. You can tell, you can have conversations and have such quality engagement with folks. You can find out their story and what motivates them, so that when you follow back up with them, you can refer to that. It's obviously got so many other benefits. You don't want to just necessarily look at it from was it worth it from a list growth standpoint, as long as you are seeing those other benefits. But that's sort of a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. And then diving into what we can do online. So first and foremost, if you're not asking your supporters to forward and share, this is the lowest hanging fruit. And there's tons of data that backs this up, that people are so much more likely to be influenced by their friends than they are organizations. So let's arm our supporters with being ambassadors for our organization, and let's ask them explicitly to get out there and share our stuff with their friends. I wanted to start by sharing these awesome examples that are highlighted in red. So the one on the left is from Stroud. So if you get to the bottom of your email, of an email that they sent, was this, sorry, this is really tiny on my screen and I'm getting old and can't see very well. Was this email forwarded to you? Subscribe here. It's super, super easy. And if you have read an entire email, like, that person is so engaged, let's make sure they can sign up for your list so they can get more email like this. Another example over to the right here, please forward this email to your friends and coworkers. An explicit ask from National Women's Law Center. That is, again, if one of your list members has read all the way to the bottom, which I'm leaning into that, because that is kind of a lot for someone to read an entire email these days. Let's ask them to do the next step and forward that message too. So those are really great examples. And the great thing about using, I don't know if this is like the official word, I call it email footers. You set it and forget it. Obviously make sure all the links that you have don't go bad if maybe you migrate your website or something like that. That's super important, but you don't really have to do anything else. Next, I wanted to just highlight this example in this box. So one of the things that we incorporate into our email calendar routinely for the express purpose of list growth is to ask people who took actions of ours to forward those actions to their friends or post it on Facebook. Of course, we want to increase the number of people who just take actions, but really it's that for this audience, it's all about for them to be ambassadors. So, if you have events and you have people, maybe add a message into your message series that goes to people who've signed up and say, hey, like, I can't wait to see you next Tuesday. Like, could you, help us get the word out and send this to 3 friends or something like that. There's lots of different ways if you don't do actions. It's totally just one example. So the next example, so list growth is so much more than just framing our ask as sign up for our list, right? If we can provide like a good promise on the content that people are going to get and make it compelling. There's so many reasons that people are going to want to share their information with us. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Rita, back over to Rita to talk about an awesome effort that she ran for the coalition. So Rita, take it away.
I think we might have lost Rita.
Oh no. Okay, well, I will take it away for her. That is a bummer. So, they ran, oh man, I actually don't have a write up on this, but I will say they did this amazing quiz, which I think is like so super cute. So you can see some examples of basically, it's what Delaware River creature are you? And here's some graphics that she put together. Super duper cute. Here's some examples of social media content. Again, just the whole idea of like, why is someone filling out a form and giving you their contact information? You want to make that ask super compelling. Another example, this one is from our friends at Alliance for Watershed Education, and I believe Micah has a conflict, so she wasn't able to make this call, which is totally cool, but I wanted to be sure to share this example because it's a great one, a raffle. So on this example, they basically, by asking people to sign up for their newsletter and in their in-person River Days, which, River Days engages with countless thousands of people in person, right? So giving people not a reason to like, why am I filling out this clipboard if I'm just at this festival? Well, you get entered into a offer to win national parks passes. That is incredible. Like such a good reason. Like I would definitely like try for that. So this was really successful for them. It was I think she said one of her primary ways of growing their email list. The parks passes were subsidized by a business. So that's how they had that covered. That can also be a really great way to engage with some partners sort of in that space. And here is a graphic also about their campaign that they use to promote it online. So again, very, very clear, really, really clear call to action. Win a parks pass, sign up for our newsletter for a chance to win. Just a great way of doing that. So I definitely wanted to highlight that. And Rita, I'm so glad that you are back. We sort of went over your example. I don't know if you want to share, I don't know if you have at your fingertips sort of the number of people who joined your list or anything else in particular that you want to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. So quizzes are just really super popular online. And when we were thinking about how can we build out our external list, so the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, much of our communication is between our member groups. So we have about 150 members, but we wanted to put together a newsletter that was going to reach people that lived within the watershed, and our list was kind of small for that. And so, we were thinking about like what gets people to click on things online, and quizzes. Everyone wants to know which friend's character they are or what type of food they are. Are you a hamburger or a pizza? So we decided to do which Delaware River creature are you? And before we even launched the quiz, we started doing some Delaware River creature feature posts kind of in the weeks leading up to the quiz launch, just to kind of get our audience on social media in the know about some of these animals and the wildlife within the watershed. And then we created a quiz online, which we used a service called Interact on tryinteract.com. But there's so many different quiz services out there. Like, you don't have to use Interact, but there's so many different quiz services out there that you can set up your quiz for. And so we used Interact. They gave us I think that it was like a 2-week free trial, and then we bought a month's worth of like quiz time or whatever. It's called a month's contract. And so we launched the quiz, and we had it running for about a month and a half. And the way that it was set up is you would, on social media, you would see some of these posts and these nice graphics that we worked up asking you, which Delaware River creature are you? What's your Delaware River spirit animal? Things like that. Really pretty pictures and catchy posts that would get people to click on it. And we put that all across our social media. And then what we did is right before, the way that Interact works is it lets you set up your quiz so that before people get their results, they have to enter their email address. And then we were very honest. It says, please enter your email address. You will be added to our email list, and you'll get an email from us, twice a month. We'll never send you spam or whatever. And just through the quiz, we actually ended up getting 250 new email signups in a month and a half, which is really good for, us doing like minimal outreach and stuff like that directly to people. It was just a fun thing that gave us a lot of great social media content. And then also we were able to educate people about wildlife that lives within the watershed. And then people were able to identify and share which animal they were. And then the way that Interact works is that they allow you to create posts for whatever your results are. So people would share that on their social media, and then that will get us even more people taking the quiz and ending up on our email list. So it was really successful. We got 250 new email signups within a month and a half. We only had to pay for a month of Interact. And by the way, I am the black bear. I took the quiz and I found out I'm the black bear. And yeah, so it was really successful.
That's awesome. Thanks, Rita. Love it. Okay, cool. So another great way of engaging your list and trying to get new people is through surveys. So now here's an example that we did at New Jersey LCB. So one of the things that and I think, one of the things that I want to highlight that Rita said is list growth can be expensive and time consuming. We don't have big budgets and we don't have lots of time. So thinking about things that are super doable to me is obviously we want to start there. So one of the things that we do at New Jersey LCV every legislative session is we work with partners to come up with a common legislative agenda that identifies our top 3 to 5 priorities for the upcoming legislative session. For the first time, we were like, hey, why don't we engage our supporters on this? So we really, our primary goal for the survey was as an engagement mechanism for our existing members and to find out, to take their temperature. But we also got list growth from this. We got a few dozen folks, which was certainly modest. I don't think we blew this out of the water in terms of growth. We could have definitely been more aggressive, but since that wasn't our primary goal, and I think we had a lot going on at the same time of our organization, but a survey can be just an excellent way to get new people to your organization. Another example I wanted to share is using your resources to collect email addresses. And this one might feel counterintuitive, right? As nonprofits, we are producing tips and papers and all sorts of stuff, and we just want as many people to see them. And why would we ask someone to have to fill out a form to get it first? But first off, it is pretty common. And if we give people a good reason of why we need their information and the content is something that people really want, it's probably not a barrier at all to ask people to tell us who they are. So this example, of course, is not from the nonprofit space, but I think it's a cool one because it just sort of has the elements, right, of a kit. Now, your organization probably has lots of resources that maybe you haven't packaged them like a kit. So it's something to think about. Are there, a how to make a rain garden or how to, conserve your water at home? What do you already have that if you just bundled it a little bit differently, you could use it for list growth? When you click through on this one, you want to make sure, and I wanted to highlight the form, is that, you want to make sure that the information you're asking for, number one, feels really relevant to the user, and also that you plan to use it. So for example, if you are asking someone to tell you who they are and sign up for more, before they get your kit about how to install a rain garden, ask information that's going to be relevant and that you'll use in your follow-up. So maybe it's, how many acres is your property? If they tell you 5 or 0.5, you can then, and obviously if you don't follow up with folks, I would say in terms of that follow-up, using resources, And I would definitely include and be intentional about your follow-up, because it's like pure gold. You know exactly what someone wants from you. So you can reach back out to them. Hey, did you do that rain garden? Like, what else do you need? Or can you share your story? Like, you can move people up the ladder really quickly, you know, using this method. But when you follow up, if they've told you I am a homeowner, or I'm not, or this is the amount of property, you can say like, hey, you know, did you know we also have this great webinar coming up for people just in your situation? Whether it is just in their situation or applies to everyone, doesn't really matter, but you really want to like tailor your follow-up to what someone told you about them. So it's something to think about. I think it's something that's probably really underutilized in our community, when I think about like just the amazing resources that we have across all our organizations. And something that, I'll be honest, I don't think we even do ourselves. So we should probably try that. Next up is social media. Now, obviously, you know, we all spend tons of time, you know, creating really engaging social media pages and getting news out to people and reaching as many people as we can. We should absolutely be super aggressive about thinking about social media as a way to grow our list. Here's an example from, again, our friends at American Literal Society. They are utilizing Facebook's built-in sign-up button. There are there's like a learn more and some other stuff. I think there's a donate, which works for 501c3s. You know, so you have to pick one. They're doing the sign-up, which I think is really cool and something to consider. But of course, use social media, you know, when you develop those amazing quizzes like Rita talked about, or your surveys, or your raffles, or your resources that, again, ask people to tell you who they are before they can complete the process. Absolutely share them on social media. And don't just share them once, share them multiple times. Social media is sort of a place where you cannot over message people. You know, here's a great one from Move On. You know, will you commit to flatten the curve, take the survey? You know, again, when we think about like what's doable, this kind of thing is probably pretty doable. I'm sure they were already thinking about like, okay, how can we put out content that's relevant? Here are some tips. And let's pair it with a survey. Why not? You know, so it's sort of where you can think creatively about how can we pair materials that we already are going to do with a list growth avenue. So I think this is a kind of a cool example and reminder. Of course, we have our websites and our friends at American Literal Society, who obviously must have like amazing list growth because they are doing so many great things. On their homepage, you know, I'm sure like no matter what you click on in various forms that they have, that those are all like email list growth tools. But here's a great demonstration of like join our email list. It could not be more clear what you are getting. And they really tell the story of their organization as well, which I think is super awesome. So making sure that that ask is front and center on your homepage and not necessarily just in a like take action or get involved section of your website is really, really key. Another example that I wanted to share, also a homepage email ask example, is from our friends at M&R Strategic Services. If you're not familiar with them, M&R Strategic Services is a firm of many based in Washington, D.C. that they advise progressive nonprofits. That's the only type of organization that they work with. And they work with organizations with really, really big budgets, but they share tons, like everything that they learn and tons of best practices and new tests, like totally for free. They're a great resource that you know, you can learn from. And I love this example because really, let's be honest, they're just asking you to get on their list, but that's not the frame they use. You know, get M&R's advice for nonprofits in your inbox. Love it. Like that is a promise of the content I'm going to get that is for me, and that sounds great. I also love this button of Beam Me Up, and it doesn't mean we all have to be like quirky or cute, but it sort of gives me insight into like their organization's culture, and that probably the content I'm going to get is like fun and playful and full of personality and something that you know, is going to stand out as well. So you don't have to just stick with like the sign up button if there's something else that works for your organization. Another website best practice, if you can, think about incorporating sign up fields on every page of your website. So at our website at Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania and at New Jersey LCV, our websites have in this upper right sort of the same content on every single page. So, you know, we could put lots of things, I guess, but we've really been focused on like growth and engagement. And so the fields of email address and zip code are on every page, no matter where you are. And so it just makes it very easy that sort of whenever someone is sort of compelled to be like, oh yeah, I wanna do more, we can capture their information. It is also in the, you know, get involved, but it's on every page. And then lastly, I wanted to share an example, of course, you can also use a Lightbox on your website, or maybe not, of course. I mean, you know, it may take some time and budget and outsourcing, but it's something to consider. I love this example. I don't know if you're like me, but I somehow use like thesaurus.com and dictionary.com like all the time. But I thought this was awesome. This was an awesome Lightbox example because it brings so many best practices together. You know, first off, they're only asking for email address. That makes it super easy. You know, their subscribe button is very clear. There's also a no thanks. Like if you want to bypass this, that's totally cool. They also have an X, so it's not a barrier. They're also making it clear, sign up for our word of the day daily newsletter. What am I going to get? Like, why should I hand over my information and add you to my already overwhelmed inbox? Okay, yeah, word of the day, that sounds pretty cool. So light boxes are something to keep in mind, you know, and again, using those best practices. Another really awesome way you can grow your list that I know some of our partners have worked with us on are action pages. Now this is as part of our funds that we are as a watershed-wide organization that we're funded to help organizations like yours are hosting action pages for you. I know a lot of organizations, you don't have like functionality to hold like an advocacy form, and maybe you only need to do something like this like once a year or twice a year. Why would you invest in that? So we have hosted pages for lots of organizations like our friends at Musconetcong Watershed Association and TTF. Not only does this give you more content that you can then share with your list so that your members can act and share on your social media pages so people can act and join, or your website. Having that great content is great for all the ways that you currently engage with your folks. But when we share it with our list as well, we will send you all the names of all the people who join, who sign up, and hopefully of the folks, so for example, at New Jersey LCV, we gave Musconetcong Watershed Association all the contact information for everyone who signed. And so we hope that added, hundreds of people to their list with really no effort on their part. So we're very, very excited about that. It's part of the services that we are funded to provide. And of course, at the bottom of the page, we had that disclaimer that made it very clear that when, by signing, someone's going to join both organizations' lists. And with that, I'm going to focus on some paid acquisition. So thinking about online ads, it's so easy to just start, right? And start thinking about start the conversation of okay, where are we going to put online ads? And what is the ad going to be? And get into the creative process, because that's what's so super fun. But of course, before we get started, and this is true with so many efforts that our organizations do, we need to ask some key questions. What is the goal of our ads? This is, just some marketing terminology, but direct response. Do you want someone to complete your form? Awareness and branding, education. You want to get the word out, or persuasion, which is essentially, getting people to maybe change your behavior. All different kinds of ads. And where this matters is it might impact both not only what your ad is going to say, but also maybe who it goes to and how it's set up on the back end. So really being clear about what do you want these ads to do? And sometimes you might be forced to make some hard decisions. You want it to do everything. Well, narrowing in and prioritizing is something that we all have to do. The audience, who can see these ads? Because you want it, that's absolutely going to inform where you're going, whether you are going to contact, rural people, rural retirees or urban youth, your ads are going to be in different places and totally do different things. So that's really, really important to know. thinking about what kind of ads can you do. Sometimes this might come down to budget. If you don't have, technical capability in-house, you may not be able to do a video ad, or maybe you can. But also, if you have the ability to make a video, you will also then need to know, okay, well, what is the length that is the best? So, with this bullet, I'd say there's lots of, just Googling like online ads. You can find lots of resources. We're of course always available to help advise however we can. But knowing the ads themselves is going to be helpful. And then identifying how are you going to measure if your ads are working. It of course goes back to your goal. If you want to get new names, completion rates are going to be super important. If it's education, it might be just sort of the reach of your ads. If it otherwise, you might want to look at other kinds of metrics and other kinds of engagement metrics. So we could spend multiple days, if not months, or entire courses talking about digital ads, but since we don't have that time, we're going to stick to one example. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hillary to talk about some basics of doing boosted posts on Facebook.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, so Kristen gave you a really great overview of paid acquisition in general, and all of that applies to Facebook. So this on this slide is one example of an ad that we ran using one of the action pages that we put together, so we typically do a lot of our list building using links like these that are created in every action, which is the database we use, so that there's a really clear streamline for when people respond to the ad, they are added directly to our system. So it's pretty easy to do. But if you don't have a fancy CMS or a database like that, it's also really easy to do list building in Facebook with Facebook ads using a form that people fill out directly in Facebook that then you download and can upload into your email list. And that, we're not going to cover that today, but is actually surprisingly straightforward to do. And I'm happy to talk more about that particular tactic separately if you have questions about that. So if you will go to the next slide, Kristen. So this is a screenshot of what boosting a post looks like if you're actually boosting a post from your Facebook page. This is probably the easiest way to do it, and Facebook has recently made it more robust, so you can do almost everything to do paid acquisition through Facebook in this platform if you don't want to go directly into the Facebook ad manager. Kristen mentioned that the first thing you need to do in your paid acquisition is to identify sort of your goal or objective, and that's the first thing that Facebook wants you to do as well. So typically if you're doing paid acquisition for names, you want to make sure that your objective is related to getting people to actually do something with that link. So in this example, sending people to your website. And then the next thing you'll want to consider is whether you want to include a post button that is included in your post, which is sort of an additional call to action, like we've seen in a lot of the other examples that Kristen said. And that is, you can make that button learn more or sign up or donate or, any number of things that sort of the options. I know they just added some new options literally yesterday, so it's changing. And that can be a really useful tool to sort of drive the message home. And the data that we've seen said that it's really useful to include that extra button. And then on this slide, the last thing I'll say is that many of you may know this already because this, I think, affects most of the organizations on this call, which is that because of Facebook's new ad policies, more than likely the ads that you're doing, even this ad that's just about the Great American Outdoors Act, that falls into a special ad category for Facebook because it's related to environmental issues. And so that is a box you're gonna have to check for an ad like this, but it also requires quite a bit of work ahead of time. So that's something to know ahead of time. The next slide, please. And so then the next thing you'll do is identify the people you want to reach with this campaign. And this can be actually pretty tricky because you want to reach the right people, the people who are primed to take the next step with you and join your email list. But you don't want to be too specific, because if you are too specific, your costs will skyrocket. So you can do some of the targeting that that Facebook offers you here, just by location, or people who like your page, or people who like your page and their friends, which is that's a pretty that could be a useful way to target people, because if they like your page, you know already that they are interested in the work that you do. But you can also upload custom audiences, and we typically do that not necessarily to target those specific people, but to not target those people, because for so many of our campaigns, we want to make sure that we're getting new names, and we don't want to waste any money showing our ad to people who are already on our email list. So what we do is we upload our email list to Facebook and tell Facebook to suppress those names. We don't want Facebook to show the ads to those people. And then in most cases, I recommend just using the automatic placements that they recommend. There may be specific moments when you might turn off that little blue thing that's automatically checked, but it's not necessary. Then if you'll go to the next slide, you do need to go into Facebook Business Manager, or the Ads Manager, excuse me, to check out how your ads are going. This is not one of those things where it's just kind of a set and forget kind of thing. You want to be able to go and look at your campaigns and see if there's anything you can adjust, because the great thing about managing ads yourself in a digital platform like Facebook is that you can manage them yourself. And so there's a lot of information in the back end of Facebook Manager. It's very overwhelming. So a thing to keep in mind is is your goal that you set ahead of time. Kristen mentioned this, that if your goal is to reach as many people as possible, you need to look at the metric that goes with that. So in that, if you're trying to reach as many people as possible, you'll look at the reach metric, which is the column kind of in the middle of this page. But if you want to get as many, thanks Kristen, yeah. But if you want to get as many people to click on your website, you'll pay more attention to the unique link clicks column. And for other you might also use a conversion metric, which a conversion objective, which is a separate column as well. So you can customize these columns so that you sort of get rid of the information you don't care about and focus in on the information that you do care about. And that can help you adjust your campaign over time. I think that's the very quick intro to Facebook ads for acquisition.
Awesome. Thanks, Hillary. And before we wrap this up, I wanted to share an example from our friends at New York League of Conservation Voters, where they basically took one of those super smart incentives, right? Take the pledge and enter to win a free rain barrel. So pretty much like a raffle type of thing. But they did ads behind it. So just such a smart way. And one of the things that can make so much sense for this. So they are working to sort of do constituency building in the upper Delaware, which we know is really tough. I mean, I don't have to tell all of you that. But so it can just be really hard, especially if you're in a rural area, to narrow in on a particular region. So, again, depending on your goals, the Ads Manager or Facebook ads or lots of other, tools too, can really help you hone in on a particular geographic area where otherwise it would just take forever, to build a list. Anything, and I believe Shahara's on. I don't know, Shahara, if there's anything else you want to say about that.
I don't really have anything else to say. You covered it really well, Kristen.
Okay,
These were really successful ads.
awesome. That's great. I don't know if I said, yeah, it yielded 140 new names in Upper Delaware. Oh yeah, there's right there. Okay, great. So super quick. I wanted to share a couple of tips for increasing your email opens and just things to get you thinking about, right? If you're spending all this time and energy to build a list, then having a list that actually reads your stuff is super important and is certainly worth all of our time. One of the things, as opposed to like going through all these best practices and say, think of this and this and this, really the best practice kind of depends on your organization when it comes to opening and those elements. There's lots of variables. Time of day can make a difference. The sender name, I've been reading that sender name can be even more important than the subject line itself. So thinking about, this is something that you've not really thought about. It could be worth like setting aside like a planning meeting to or just trying something new and seeing, how the numbers stack up. Definitely consider using personal names instead of an organization. And we're going to talk about some sender names. I have some examples in a second. Or just changing it like constantly, like having a bunch in rotation. Lots of organizations like truly send their emails from the people who it's either in their area. I don't know if they're all written by those people, but I know we send like our legislative email, like on our Pennsylvania side, we send our legislative emails all from our, political director, and our most of our political emails from her too. Our fundraising emails, a lot of them comes from our development person or our executive director. Our organizing emails come from the organizer, and so on and so forth. Personalization. So what that means is in the subject line, you can insert, right, like first name, come to our Rain Barrel workshop. So if you haven't tried that, it's something to give a try. I think that's supported by a lot of different, tools that are out there. And you can also get creative. You might not only be able to use first name field, think about other fields. I would definitely highlight urgency or deadlines. So like if there's, hey, last chance to sign up for this webinar, 1 hour to go, or like, oh, we have, exclusive or limited or whatever it may be, like trying to stand out in a busy email box is just super important. And then other elements to just try are everything from like the length of a subject line, capitalization, special characters, the list goes on and on. Sort of taking that into practice. This is a snapshot from my promotions email boxes. They are black. I like never go my promotions in inbox, but that's okay. I'm just a little overwhelmed by email. And I sign up for lots and lots and lots of lists. But you can see there's like a mix. And to me, this really says like there's no one best practice, right? There's everything from, first name, comma, organization, companies that are capitalized, not capitalized, a company with sale, there's special characters in the subject lines, there's short subject lines, there's really, really long subject lines. And of course it goes without saying, everyone, they're reading their emails on their phones as well. So of course, when you're like previewing an email, looking on your phone, in addition on your regular computer screen is very, very important. But just continuing to like try new things. Don't get just stuck in a rut if that is sort of where your organization is. If you are trying new things, always look at your metrics. And I wanted to, it is 2020, I can't resist. I wanted to learn a little bit from what the politicos are doing. Somehow I'm on Donald Trump's list. I'm sure that says a lot about his email acquisition tactics. But I'm also on the Joe Biden list. So like, here's just an amazing snapshot. This was what was in my inbox over 3 days. This is not a political message. This is just like, let's learn. This is just 3 days of emails. So this demonstrates, I'm sure they tested the heck out of these. We don't have time to get an A/B testing, but if you have the ability to A/B test, at the bare minimum, doing A/B testing on every email on the subject line, as long as the audience is like, not like 100 people, I would do that. And there's no, a variety of senders, I would say, also allows for a greater volume. If I'm getting like an email from Joe Biden versus his headquarters, they're different people. And I just, I know I bristle less when it's like, oh, well, that's cool. I'm gonna, they're from different folks. It shows like you can't worry about sending too many emails. If anyone in your organization like is saying you're sending too many emails, they are probably wrong. I mean, you know, look at your data. If your open rates are not very good, or if you're not sure they're good, you know, pay attention to it. But that's probably not a concern for any of us. And just, you know, bottom line, like a variation is so, so important. We're all just getting flooded and changing it up, you know, and also constantly reevaluating what works in, I mean, this year more than ever, right? What worked in January is not necessarily what was working in April, is not what's working in August. You know, just things are changing a lot. So you always want to try new things. And so with that, I wasn't sure if we had any existing questions or if folks wanted to share examples of stuff that they've tried that worked really, really well. So we can like borrow from each other, or if folks have questions.
There are a couple of questions in the chat box. Amy asks, are there any tips for justifying the bare minimum approach to leadership teams or executive directors who insist on always asking for email, phone, etc. In that, I think in that form that you talked about at the very beginning, where you just asked for the email address.
So tips of folks
like how to justify. Yeah, how to like justify this to your leadership team.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you know, I think it all comes down to like where that form is being presented, right? If it's a form that's being shared to like your board or like your top people, you can probably ask them like all sorts of stuff, right? Or if it's explicitly a survey, like you're asking people their opinions and they know what they're getting into when they, you know, or like that quiz, they want to find out like this answer and they're willing to answer lots of questions, and they're ready for like an interaction. But, you know, I would just say like, I actually, and you need to do this, right? That there is a plan to get the other information later. That's probably your best justification, and just, you know, getting people into your email list so that they can get your newsletters, and we also being able to demonstrate the value of that product. You know, if they're getting to your newsletter, show them this is what our newsletter brings in terms of donations, and if we increase our newsletter audience by whatever %, we project to see donations go up by X. So I think those would probably be the you know, tell people that there is a plan and have a plan for getting that information later, and tell people like what they could get with a bigger list, probably in terms of dollars.
Cool, thank you. And Kate wanted to know how do you A/B test? Do you just divide the list in half, or do you use other metrics to do that?
So I did take a look at a couple of other like Constant Contact, maybe MailChimp. So it does look like we don't use those tools, so I've never used those tools, so I'm less familiar. So hopefully your email provider has that ability. If it doesn't, honestly, I would like Google that out and like try and figure out what works best. But yes, you do want to get random samples, equal samples. And there's two different ways of A/B testing. You know, so there's sort of the A/B test where you're going to you test to a small portion and you're going to send to the winner. So that's really what subject line testing typically is about, where you have two different versions or two different senders or whatever, right? You're going to change one element and you're going to send to the winner, or you just want to find something out. And so you just send 50-50. And you're going to then to maybe establish a new best practice. That can be really helpful, in particular on like fundraising asks, where you're like looking at how am I going to establish what success looks like and how I'm going to determine a winner. You know, fundraising response rates are super low. They're like 0.05 is like a good response rate. And so that's just not enough to probably go, you know, like a 10% and go to a winner. That can be really helpful, especially say like end of year fundraising. If your organization does that and sends lots of, you know, 6, 7, 8 emails at the end of the year, You know, you might want to A/B test like some things like maybe your sender or something. And so like that will then to your entire file and split that and see how that goes. So that then you can then set yourself up for the rest of the series and say, okay, we're going to go with this.
Cool. And then it looks like there's just one last question in the chat box. So if folks have additional questions in our last 2 minutes, feel free to add them to the chat now. But this is another question from Kate, which is, do you know if there's like a particular email software that's better than others for list acquisition?
Oh, for list acquisition.
Well, I added the list acquisition just in general. Is there an email software that's better than others?
I mean, if it is just sort of email software like a MailChimp or Constant Contact, I honestly don't know. You know, I would just be really clear like what your needs are and like literally just, you know, probably goes without saying, like document all that, your list size, what you think you're going to grow to, your volume, all that stuff, so you get the best deal and you know what you need. In terms of acquisition, I mean, we've tried a lot of different things, you know, and there's lots of controversy over Facebook right now. You've probably seen a lot of nonprofits are trying to not put ads on Facebook as a way to like, because they think they've been bad actors, and it's really, really a tough time. So I would definitely say like I would not do like banner ads on a newspaper for list acquisition. That is not going to get you list acquisition. You know, I don't think Twitter even does ads, so you don't have to worry about that. I mean, Facebook is really great because like, you know, it can yield a lot of names at a low cost. There's also other avenues like care2.com or vendors like that that just you can make deals with them. You know, they are a list acquisition like firm, I guess, and they can get you names like per at a set dollar amount. So yeah, so a lot of different ones.
Cool. Well, it is noon, and so I think it is time to wrap up. Kristen has included her email address on this last slide, so if you anticipate having additional questions, I'm sure Kristen would welcome emails with questions from anyone. So yeah, thanks Kristen for your presentation today, and thanks everyone for joining us, and we will be sending out this recording you know, in the very near future.
Thanks everybody, really appreciate it.